the most exciting thing about cannabis drinks is there's so much room to be creative at this point. I think we're really at the tip of what this category can be.
So thanks for taking the time. Tell us a bit about your book launch.
Yeah, so my name is Jamie Evans, and I'm the founder of the Herb Somm. And I've actually launched 2 books so far throughout my career. The first book was The Ultimate Guide to CBD, which came out in April of 2020. Mm-hmm. And then my most recent book, Cannabis Drinks, launched in April 2021. Mm-hmm. There's the book. And this explores all aspects of the cannabis drink space.
Fantastic.
As well as an exploration of recipes. So I really tried to write a guide that could guide you through the process of making infusions at home, but as well as understand the different categories within cannabis drinks.
Yep.
So we're seeing cannabis-infused seltzers, cannabis-infused wine, cannabis beers. That's just such an interesting category. So I really wanted to combine everything that I know about cannabis drinks into one book, if that's possible.
Fantastic.
So it's been exciting.
Great. What do you mean by cannabis drinks, right? So one of the interviews I had before this was a master of wine, and he asked me this exact question, and I just said, there can be anything, cannabis water, cannabis, this and that. So what defines cannabis drinks?
So I would define cannabis drinks as a beverage that's infused with cannabinoids. So whether that's infused with CBD, THC, or a combination of different cannabinoids, which we're actually seeing a lot of today, is this combination or blend of cannabinoids that are going into a drink. When you're thinking of different categories like a cannabis-infused wine or a cannabis-infused beer, so legally, if you're trying to make this type of product, it has to be dealcoholized. And so you cannot have alcohol and cannabis mixed into the same product at this point. So when you're seeing these different types of products out in the market, they've actually been dealcoholized. So it's a very innovative category. I think science is really driving the beverages that we're seeing out there today. And within the last 2 to 3 years, we've just seen so much improvement with flavor, with how the beverages are made. These products are now shelf stable. And so all of the things that have happened within the innovation and the scientific research that's really going into this space has made these drinks viable.
And shelf stable, meaning it's more like a spirit, so it's okay if it stays there for 5 years, and that's great.
Maybe not 5 years, but definitely it doesn't need to be refrigerated.
All right,
understood. And so that was one of the issues when the cannabis beverages were first coming out, is they were not able to sit on on a dispensary shelf. And so now these products, because of the nano emulsion technology that we're using to infuse the products, now it's able to sit on a shelf.
Got it.
And if a dispensary has a refrigerator, that's awesome.
So it's all right, but it depends on the beverage, right? It depends on if it's just like cannabis gin, it goes maybe on the shelf. But if it's something which requires the cannabis RTD, maybe refrigeration.
So, and also with a dispensary model, I think, which is something so great, now that we're seeing refrigeration, consumers can have this grab and go experience. So they can walk in, they could get a can of cannabis infused wine. And they can walk right out and have it like a normal beverage experience and have it be chilled. So I think in the beverage space, it's just really important to have that option. But because of all the innovation in science that's going into this, you can walk into a dispensary and these beverages don't have to be refrigerated.
And right now, the only place people can buy cannabis beverages or drinks is in dispensaries, correct?
Yes. So if it's cannabis derived, infused with THC, these beverages do need to be purchased at a licensed dispensary, or you can purchase them from a licensed delivery service.
All right.
So those are kind of your 2 options at this point.
And what has any category made it to supermarkets or any other general merchandising?
So that's a really good question. In the CBD world, we're actually seeing hemp-derived CBD products arrive in Whole Foods, arrive in different types of special and grocery stores. So we are seeing the hemp CBD side of the drinks world come into those kind of mainstream stores.
Got it.
But THC still has to be through a dispensary.
What do you think is like one myth that people just get confused with, cannabis cocktails? Because if I think cocktails is like obviously alcohol is there, but legally you're saying it's not allowed. But you're talking about home making, right?
Yeah. So for homemaking,
it's fine.
Certainly, you can certainly mix the two together. And in my book, I actually teach you how to do that in a very safe and
there must be
way.
There must be a scientific and a safe way. Otherwise, you can be messed up.
Yeah, and cannabis and alcohol are both very strong intoxicants.
Yep.
And so if you mix them together in the wrong way, you could get very dizzy and sick.
Yeah.
But there is a really safe way to do this, and there is a beautiful way to do this as well, to make these cannabis cocktails taste very good.
Great.
But there's also a trend of doing mocktails, so doing like a cannabis mocktail with no alcohol. And I think people who are really trying to stay away from alcohol for health purposes are really making a conscious decision to cut back on alcohol. I think cannabis drinks is really providing this gateway to a new type of beverage that they can experience.
I think because of obviously the legal side of distribution bottleneck, we don't see much data out there, right? Like what actually is being consumed versus what's being sold.
Yeah.
So your gut says that this is happening, like the drinks people are mixing and people are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a lot of interest in the topic.
Yep.
Like we were talking about earlier, back in 2018, there was this big exploration of using CBD into cocktails. So even here in San Francisco, there was cocktail menus that have CBD in every cocktail because people were so curious about it.
But isn't that illegal?
But now, yes. So in 2018, the health department came along and there wasn't enough research to prove that hemp CBD could be used in food and beverage. So the health department made everyone pull these fanciful cocktails off the menu. And we haven't been able to see that again. But there was this really special period in California where we were seeing these CBD cocktails.
Amazing.
You could go into a normal cocktail bar and order them. So hopefully one day we'll see that again. But at home, you can certainly mix around and play with it.
What made you transition or pivot into cannabis? What triggered you? Any moment or anything that just like you felt that I want to go in here? And you come from a wine background, right? So just walk us over on what you've been doing and then how you transitioned here.
Yeah, so I come from a long history of working in the wine industry. So I spent over a decade working in wine. I actually went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I studied wine and viticulture, majored in wine business. And worked at different companies such as Jackson Family Wines. I worked with the Mondavi family. I helped launch a small tasting room in San Francisco called Jack's Vineyard. So really did many different things in the wine space. But in 2017, I really started to notice this growing culinary cannabis industry. And of course, cannabis in San Francisco has always been a very important part of the culture. And so in 2017, I just really started to take notice of it. But also during that time, I had a trauma that I experienced on my own. And I witnessed this terrible car accident and I really couldn't sleep. So I started researching cannabis. I didn't want to turn to pharmaceutical drugs to help me sleep or alcohol to help me sleep. And cannabis was always something that kind of helped me throughout college. And I really started doing more research. And so during that time, I quickly discovered there was just so many similarities between cannabis and wine to begin with. But also I discovered that cannabis just works with our body in this incredible way. And we're almost made to consume it. The way our endocannabinoid system just interacts with different cannabinoids.
Interesting,
And so when I discovered this, I was just like, wow, this is so interesting. I just want to learn more.
So it was more of as a user, you started generating interest. Then like, this is a great business. Let me start something.
Yes. Yeah. So it really started out, really trying to research it for medicinal purposes.
Fantastic.
But really, I fell in love with the plant. I fell in love with the industry. And I didn't really have traditional capital to start a formal business. So I launched a blog, and I wanted to interview as many people as I could just to learn about the space.
Got it.
And so coming from wine, you know, the gourmet side of the cannabis industry was super fascinating. So I started reaching out to different cannabis chefs. I started reaching out to edible producers, and it just was so interesting to learn how to cook with cannabis and how to really think about it as this gourmet ingredient. And as soon as cannabis went recreationally legal in 2018, because of my wine background and all the events that I had done in the wine space, I really wanted to bring that experience into cannabis. So I started hosting Cannabis Infused dinners.
Okay.
And so this
infused drinks dinners.
And so infused food dinners.
Food dinners. All right. Yes. The cuisines. And
different cuisines.
And you had some other chef with you?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. So I partnered with, I had a series called Thursday Infused.
Okay.
And so I partnered with all the top chefs from California, and we would partner together to create this 4 to 5 course tasting meal.
And I believe that would be at a private house, not...
Yes, yeah.
Because it was not allowed, or it's still not allowed, I believe,
yeah.
right?
So there is, it's definitely like an underground
event.
Yes,
yeah.
But it was really focused on educating consumers how to approach cannabis in this really elevated, way, and really thinking about how you can pair cannabis with different foods, different ingredients.
Very interesting.
And different wines.
So
as well.
people, did not get high after eating, or how did you do the course? And I'm sure there's a science behind appetizer versus main course, dessert. And...
Yeah, so during my dinners, we would serve 5 milligrams of THC max throughout the entire meal. But the most important part of
and
these
compare
dinners,
that with me, let's say with the cookie. Is it like one cookie has 10?
Yeah, so it depends on what type of edible.
All right, cool.
But the most important part of these infused dinners is the guests could actually choose their custom dose.
Okay.
So we would recommend 5 milligrams max. But if if someone was coming to the event, they're like, I feel more comfortable at 2.5 milligrams.
Understood.
The chef was so precise that they could actually customize each guest's meal.
Very nice. Yeah.
Which, honestly, I think with infused cuisine, that is the most important part.
So which means, was the cannabis the topping or garnishing area, or in the mixing, where did it get involved?
Yeah, so when you're infusing cuisine, the chefs could really use their expertise and their creativity to infuse the dishes. So I've seen everything from infused sauces to infused garnishes. To infused sugar rims on a drink. So there's just so many ways that you can infuse a meal. And I think one of the most exciting things about this experience was witnessing how these chefs were really, putting their special touch on the meal.
Nice.
And so, every dinner that I hosted was completely different. And every chef had their own method of infusing cuisine, which was so interesting. So
what's the play here? Like you did that, and then now with the books, with the drinks. So you're trying to build, obviously I can understand, a little ecosystem and your place, and now you want to leverage with your own brand, right?
Right.
Talk to us about your own launch and your brand.
Yes. Well, this is the most exciting news, probably besides my book for this year, but I am launching a cannabis infused wine.
Fantastic.
And this beverage will be coming out around the holiday season of this year, and we're starting with a sparkling rosé, but we're actually calling it a sparkling rosier because in the cannabis beverage space, we really can't use wine terms.
Oh.
And so we had to do a special little twist.
So you cannot call cannabis Shiraz or something like that?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, so then you have to get your marketing hat on.
Because the thing is, you don't want to confuse a consumer that it's alcohol or...
Exactly. Yeah, so the BCC, which is the Bureau of Cannabis Control, made this law and regulation, which if you are creating a cannabis beverage, you cannot use any alcohol terms.
Very interesting fact.
Yes, and so this is why you're kind of seeing these clever play on names when you're coming across different cannabis beverages or different cannabis beers. So I've seen like cannabis beer.
But then I've heard a name, cannabis gin, right? Like,
I haven't seen that one. You'll have to show me that one.
In London, remember?
Oh, so maybe London has different regulations because this is a very specific California
maybe it's state-based.
Regulation.
All right.
Yeah, and that's the most important part about regulations is each state is different.
Got it.
Each country is different. But here in California...
So legally you cannot say, sorry to interrupt,
no
you cannot
worries.
say cannabis wine.
Legally we cannot say cannabis wine in our packaging, correct.
And marketing.
And marketing, yes. And so on like the label that you're going to see when we come out with the beverage, it says cannabis infused beverage.
Beverage or drink, because that's any category.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like the safe way and most legal way to do it. And then, like I said, we're not calling it a rosé, but we're calling it a rosier. So,
understood.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So more to come.
and how are you going with that? You know, where are you with that? What's the the batch is ready to go to the district?
So I was just at Bev Zero today. We're finalizing the formulation. And so when you're creating a cannabis infused wine, you have to use dealcoholized wine. And so, you know, coming from the wine side of the world.
So is this a winery making it, or winery is going to dealcoholize and sell it to someone else and then someone else takes over?
So I ended up purchasing a wine lot through the bulk wine market.
Understood.
And then what you do is you work with a company that can dealcoholize it for you.
Okay, and so that's Bev Zero?
And that's Bev Zero, yes. So Bev Zero has been... Zero. Yeah, there you go. So Bev Zero has been an amazing partner, and we've been working together, I think, since June to really fine-tune this formulation. And the interesting part of working with dealcoholized wine is it's not like traditional wines, of course, because the alcohol's gone.
Okay.
But alcohol adds so much to a wine. It adds aromas, it adds flavors, it really adds complexity on your palate.
Yeah.
And when you're removing it, you know, as a cannabis wine creator, you really have to add these elements back in.
Yes.
So, you know, it's been a really interesting process for me, you know, thinking about, you know, the different elements of this wine and how I can add back an acidity, how I can create this mouthfeel that you're getting from this really authentic wine experience.
How can you get that taste back, pretty much, that quality,
you have to basically build it back.
And Bev Zero helps in those kind of things?
Yeah, and so it's all R&D.
All right.
And every time I go into a session, we're playing around with, you know, the acidity, sugar levels, we're playing around with the aromas and flavors. And also, you know, the mouthfeel and the heaviness that you're getting on your palate to really deliver.
So anyone helps you with all this? Like, you know, in wine, we have master of wines, master sommeliers and experts and all that. We can always say, hey, you know, I need your report and a feedback. In cannabis, how would you go about having someone evaluate?
I evaluate it.
So it's good for me. Everything's good.
Yeah. So luckily, though, because I come from a long history in the wine industry, you know, I've been tasting wines. I'm certified. I'm a certified specialist of wine. I'm a French wine scholar, and I also have a lot of good wine friends tasting this product as well.
but like cannabis-wise, you know, isn't there a complete different evaluation system based on the consumer palate?
Yeah, that's true.
Is there anything?
I don't think there is a sort of like master of cannabis drinks, if you will, but...
Let's start master of cannabis.
Yeah.
You know, exam, apply.
I know, that's actually really interesting. But I think, you know, as people continue to develop their palate for cannabis drinks, I certainly think that could be, you know, a future job position.
So right now it's more supply driven. I think it's good. Let's go. Something like that.
So I think it really depends on your tasting team.
Got it.
I'm working with winemakers at Bev Zero as well. So there's a lot of people tasting your product.
Understood.
And evaluating.
Yep.
But I've also brought in just consumers to taste as well.
Wow. And what about the distribution side of things? I know you told me that you are at that place where you're focusing on the production right now.
Yes.
But just out of curiosity, where all can you sell this?
So right now, because the product is going to contain THC, you do need to find a cannabis distributor who can get the product into different dispensaries. So basically, it's
you cannot go direct?
You can't
you
go
can
direct.
knock doors, distilleries?
Okay. So it's very similar to
alcohol,
the wine industry.
Like prettier,
or the alcohol industry, is you need a distributor. And then you have to get into the account. And then from there, your dispensary retail partners sell to the consumer. So unfortunately, unless you're doing a hemp CBD product...
You're talking about any cannabis right now. It's 3-tier sort of thing.
With THC, yes.
So you cannot own a dispensary like alcohol, like liquor store. You cannot,
unless you have a lot of money. There are some people who have multiple licenses.
Understood.
But that is very, very difficult to do in the cannabis space. But there are certain partners who do have multiple licenses. But for the most part, in the beverage space, most people
small
do
companies.
not have that.
And then I believe your approach is to give it to a distributor and then really help him or her with the promo and brand awareness, right?
Absolutely.
That's the way you're going to help.
Yes. And really tap into the relationships that I've built over the past, 4 years that I've been doing this.
So in wine, and let's take an example of wine because it's the closest which I can compare with. So we normally, a new beverage when it goes into a retail account, it's 45% they would want to make at least, right? And then a distributor would want to make 30%.
Yeah.
And a manufacturer maybe 20, 25, right? With all that. How are the margin structures here in 3 tiers?
It's actually pretty similar.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with cannabis beverages though, it's probably a lot less.
Okay.
So I think the distributor, depending on who you're with, our distributor is taking 10%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that consignment based or?
Well, it's just because of the production levels, they kind of give you a break compared to other cannabis products.
Wow.
So it is structured differently than the wine industry. But I think if
what
you
are the terms from distributor to retailer? Is that COD or they also can give terms?
I think they can give certain terms.
Wow, just 10% in terms.
Yeah. But that's like the distributor I'm working with.
Because
and so everyone
because you're
is
going to give them the sale through.
Yeah, and so everyone is different, and
Understood.
I'm very excited. And actually, like distribution in the cannabis space too is a very growing industry too. And so we do need more cannabis. We need a lot more cannabis drinks focused distributors, which I think a lot of them are now bringing on these types of beverage programs.
Okay.
And buyers are now getting more excited about cannabis beverages as well, just because now we're getting, like I said, the shelf stable, the quality is better. There's just a greater interest from consumers. So now buyers are very interested.
So walk me over, let's say a consumer trying to understand that, can I just go in any dispensary and you'll have to ask, or it's more like a store experience where I can just pick my own bottle and walk over and go to the counter?
So it really depends on what dispensary that you're at.
Depends on the dispensary type of license?
Or it depends on the specific dispensary. Because sometimes I've been in dispensaries where you walk in, everything is just a beautiful showcase. So it's almost like behind glass.
Yep.
But then I've been into other dispensaries too where you can actually pick the product off the shelf. So it really depends on what dispensary that you're in. But, I've seen every type of dispensary. And I think it's just really interesting to see kind of the evolution of the dispensary as well. And even if you go down to LA, for instance, you're seeing these, like, you walk in, you almost feel like you're at Whole Foods.
Yeah.
It's just like...
Fantastic that is.
Yeah, it's just so beautiful and everything, everyone's just so educated and like they want to teach you about terpenes. It's just such a great experience.
Great. Let's talk about a little bit about, the culinary side of cannabis.
Yeah.
What are the trends and where is the action? Like, where do you think people can, learn more about that and start, trying experimenting things?
Yeah, so I think the culinary side of the cannabis industry is super fascinating, first of all. We have this corner that is mostly focused on the cannabis chef. And so there's so many different cannabis chefs that are out there. And a lot of people have probably seen cannabis chefs on big television series, such as, I think, Discovery Plus had their Chop 420. Netflix has done many kind of like cooking competitions with cannabis chefs. So there really is this interest in cannabis cuisine. Now, there's an interest in it, but the regulations really haven't caught up to, having cannabis-infused restaurants.
But, I've heard like the first cannabis restaurant opened in LA and all, some names we've heard, some big restaurant. Like, how are they just opening big cannabis restaurant they're marketing as this whole restaurant?
Yeah, that's
so what are they actually serving?
So with those types of cafes that have opened, they're actually not infusing the cuisine. So it's really a restaurant experience. You're getting just traditional foods, but then you can order cannabis off of their list. So it's almost like a wine list.
But you have to consume somewhere else, or just you can have here and eat?
And you can consume it on site.
While eating the food.
Right, but the food isn't infused. Yeah, but you can order, a pairing of your favorite joint or a pairing of your favorite flower.
I can order vanilla ice cream and a brownie and mix it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Understood.
It has to be prepackaged though.
It has to come from 2 different outlets, 2 different licenses.
Exactly.
Sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah. So the first one that opened was the original Cannabis Cafe.
Okay.
I had the pleasure of going there and having the experience. But yes, it was definitely 2 different licenses. And you had to order from 2 different servers even too. So, yeah. Okay.
So much of all this is like bottleneck and laws. Otherwise, it's just so ready to boom.
Yeah, and there's so many cannabis chefs out there that are ready to have this restaurant. They're ready to hit the ground running as soon as the regulations catch up. And I do think there is such a beautiful way to work with cannabis in this gourmet way that you can infuse it into a meal, you can incorporate it into a cocktail. And I think we're just right at the beginning of learning so much about cannabis, and I think it's really going to open the door to so many different culinary possibilities.
What's your thought on New York, which just opened up? I personally believe that it's going to be opened up to all the states. It's just a matter of time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think when New York decided to go recreational, I think it's the most exciting thing
I think
for
it's
the
a big
cannabis
sign of
space. I think that the media is going to catch up. I think that the culinary world in New York is going to just really embrace cannabis. It already has.
So New York is as legal as California, or still it's not? There are some pockets which they've not opened up yet.
Yeah. So the laws were passed, but it hasn't gone into effect quite yet.
All right.
And so I think as soon as recreational cannabis does roll out, which I think is next year, it's going to just be so incredibly exciting for the industry.
Amazing.
And I know everyone in my network was celebrating the day we found out. So.
Yeah. It's a big thing, I think.
So cheers to New York.
Cheers to New York.
Yes.
Because if New York comes, New Jersey comes, and all East Coast comes, right? Mm-hmm. But it's great, I think. I think DC is also already done, right?
Yes, I believe so. And there's a lot of East Coast states coming online. I know Massachusetts.
So it's just a matter of time. And then
I think Jersey is also. And it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I think it will be more like alcohol, where you can just
Yes, and I think that as cannabis rolls out in different states, it will be treated like alcohol.
What would you tell the consumers, on who are just trying to get to understand this cannabis cocktails and cannabis drinks space to start with? Like, what are the good places to start?
So my number one thing is start low, go slow, which is the motto that I like to say. But I think if you're kind of nervous about experimenting with cannabis, a really safe place to start is CBD. Mm-hmm. You can experiment with CBD. You're not going to be at risk of getting too high if you consume too much, but it'll really kind of open the door to cannabinoids and seeing how your body reacts. Once you feel a little bit more comfortable, I think that, a really great product to start with are tinctures. Mm-hmm. And so with tinctures, you can actually titrate your dose up and down depending on your comfort level. And I think that's a really great way to start. So you can microdose if you want to. Whereas if you're eating a full edible, it's really hard to kind of get that precise dose if you're new, if you're brand new to cannabis. And so what I like to say is if you're a little bit nervous, start with CBD, work your way up to some tinctures, and then really figure out what ratio works with the cannabinoids. Mm-hmm. So with cannabis products, you're going to find ratios that are high in CBD or high in THC. There's balanced ratios, and everyone's body is so different. So it's really about experimenting, finding what products work best, but really finding like the ratio that works well for you.
Got it.
Yeah.
Tell me more about, what's included in this book. I mean, what all chapters you've covered,
Yeah, so chapter 1 is really just an overview of Cannabis 101, so just education. Chapter 2 is just mixology basics.
Okay.
So if you're brand new to mixing drinks, it's a really great overview of how to work with beverages and how to create tasting notes.
Yep.
And cannabis mixology as well. Chapter 3 is called Mastering Infusions. So I'm teaching you how to actually make cannabis infusions. And so you're making cannabis-infused bitters. You're making cannabis-infused simple syrup, cannabis-infused shrubs. So you're really building out this cannabis bar pantry that then you can use in all of the recipes that are featured in the book to infuse them. So then chapters 4 and 5 are all recipes after that.
Cocktail recipes.
Cocktail recipes, smoothies, shakes, juices.
Smoothies. That's the most healthiest, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's really a drink for every type of consumer.
Cannabis kale smoothie cannot be healthier. And
there's a superfood smoothie, which I think has spinach or kale. So.
Wow.
I think one interesting question would be, how can people source the materials to be able to actually do those?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was, how So how can people source these materials or ingredients?
Yeah.
In especially this, I wouldn't ask the states that it's not legal, but let's say in California.
So I wrote this book to be very accessible for everyone. So whether you have access to just hemp CBD, like tinctures, hemp CBD flower, you can use those types of products in this book.
Got it.
Or if you are in a legal state, you can find the cannabis products quite easily at a dispensary. But I really wanted to create an approachable book that will allow any person to just pick it up and use it. Because I know all states are different, like we were saying earlier.
Yep.
And so I think it's just find what type of product you have available.
Yep.
And then start experimenting with the recipes.
Yeah, great. Because I was going to ask you, like, have you noticed how many legal states are ordering your book versus non-legal states? But that answers my question because you've made it up that you can sort of mix up with a lot of different kind of things.
And even each recipe gives you instructions if you just want to use a CBD tincture versus an infusion. So there's just really, I wanted to provide just really good directions for both types of applications.
Got it. And how big of a brand you want to make? Have you set any goals coming back to your beverage brand? Like, I'm going to sell at least, let's say 2,000 cases in the first 12 months, or depending on the distribution bottleneck we have.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. One of the important things is we're actually launching in cans.
Okay.
So we're going to do a single serve can and a 4-pack can.
Okay.
And then next year we're going to roll out our 750 bottles.
All right.
And then also create a line of kind of wine, not wine cocktails, but like kind of like a wine elixir line.
Liqueur line, sort of.
Or like elixirs. I can't disclose exactly what yet.
No problem. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, yes. But we're really hoping to expand.
Try the can first.
Yes.
And get started there. Yeah.
Yeah. And from there, I think the next thing that would be great for the brand is to get in different states. So if you can get a multi-state,
so I believe you need a local bottler, right, for getting into different states.
So to get in different states, you have to find a manufacturer in that state, which I think a lot of cannabis beverages are starting to do now.
Yep.
So that's kind of like the next play on how to keep growing.
What about direct to consumer? You will be able to sell and fulfill orders on your website?
Only if we do a hemp-derived CBD product. So you cannot do THC direct to consumer.
And yours is THC.
Yeah. Yep.
Why you selected that when it's so narrow?
I firmly believe that THC just adds so much to a beverage.
For the taste? Okay.
Not for the taste, but more for the effect.
For the kick.
Yeah, for the kick. Especially, if you're looking for an alternative to alcohol, it does kind of provide this experience where you're kind of getting that relaxation, you're getting a mild buzz.
Understood. So
similar
let's
to
say, how we have 2 beers or a couple of wines, you want a little bit of buzz starting.
Yeah.
So you have that expectations, like people, if they have 2 cannabis drinks, they want something. And you think THC provides that CBD doesn't provide.
Absolutely. I think, CBD, it depends on your body, how you react to it. But I think THC really provides kind of that euphoric experience.
Understood.
That people are looking for. But a really exciting trend that we're also seeing is this use of other cannabinoids that are mixed into the beverage. So we're seeing Delta-8 THC, which has been very popular. THCV, which is kind of this like really uplifting, energizing cannabinoid. Of course, we're seeing CBD, THC. And so I think the future is really about kind of like mixing and matching these different cannabinoids to achieve different effects.